Uh, Good evening.
Good evening, Thomas. How's things? Good
All
evening,
good.
everybody.
All good. Thank you very much, Asheen, for joining us this evening. I'm just going to start off by introducing the project that we've been doing. So it's a project that's funded by T-Buck, which is Together Building United Communities. It's all about good relations. So far we've done good relations workshops with the Irish FA into the history of football, some stuff about diversity and racism. And we've had lots of different activities. So I had a cooking class yesterday. The boys were doing, and some of the dads were giving it a go, but not very successfully, I may add, but they give it a pop anyway. And then after that, then they've done little sort of technical online sessions. They've done some other workshops, etc. as well. So there's been a bit of a flavour of everything. So thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to just first of all ask you if you can give us just a little bit of a background about yourself, where you grew up, a little bit about your childhood.
So my name's Oisin McConville. I was born in 1975 in a small village in South Armagh called Crossmaglen. I suppose when I was growing up, the area that I was growing up in was predominantly more or less ruled by the Troubles. Bombings, shootings were commonplace day in, day out. I suppose when I was growing up, the Troubles were something which sort of scared me from a very early age. And I was looking something to get me away, as far away as I could from that. When I say as far away, I love the area that I grew up in. But as I say, the Troubles from a very early age were something which didn't sit well with me. I seen things that a young lad shouldn't have saw, and I suppose, as I say, I was looking for a route out of that. And I suppose when you're from Crossmaglen, you don't really have a lot of choices as such. I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, we literally had one football pitch in the middle of the town. It was overlooked by a British Army barracks, but we had no soccer. There was no athletics. There was no gym. There was no swimming pool. There was no hurling. There was no other sport other than Gaelic football. So the natural progression for me, I had a family who were ingrained in GAA, had played it all the way through, from my grandfathers to my father to my uncles. My uncle played in the 1953 All-Ireland final with Armagh, and that seemed a natural progression for me, was that if I was going to in any way escape what was going on, then it was going to be through Gaelic football. And I don't have a lot of memories from my childhood from being really young, but I do remember one day just deciding at 4 or 5 years of age that I was going to try and be the best Gaelic footballer that I could possibly be. And that's the journey I set out on at that stage. It wasn't plain sailing, believe me. There was lots of times where I questioned myself. There was lots of time where people questioned me as far as my commitment and different things like that. But eventually, I suppose I got to where I wanted to be, and it was arduous at times. It was hard work at times, but at all times it was very, very enjoyable. I mean, when we started to win things as a young team in Crossmaglen, we were winning everything, and winning seemed to come easy. We got to senior level and we couldn't win, and that sort of tests you out as an individual. And but my youth, I remember I was having a very happy upbringing in a very loving home. But the biggest thing on my mind all the time was football. I just wanted to play. If there was a day off, I'd be in the pitch. I didn't care if it was on my own or whatever. But that's the way I was wired early on in my life.
So you talked there about having nothing else really, just apart from football and playing, for Crossmaglen, the club. What sort of, obviously, all you had was really that. You said that there's no other option for any other sports, so you had to fall in love with that sport. What sort of commitment levels did it take to get up to the standard that you got to?
Well, to begin with, I mean, I didn't see it as commitment, because I was enjoying it all the time. So, like, I didn't care if we trained 8 times a week. I would have been there, and because it was enjoyable. I think the test comes when you get to, 13, 14, 15. There's other things starting to come into your life. There's obviously, a decision to be made sometimes whether, you spend an extra hour at the books, or you go out and you kick the football around. And that decision was pretty plain for me. And my mum, who's getting on a little bit at the minute, and she hasn't been that well, but I stay with her every Thursday, and she's every Thursday she says to me, "Do you regret not spending a bit more time with the books?" But I don't, because football was all I wanted to do at that time. Football gave me a life beyond my dreams. Like, when I'm talking life beyond my dreams, like, I'm talking about playing an amateur sport. It's offered me the opportunities to see the world. I suppose I'm one of the lucky ones. I've gone in. I've been able to go into punditry, coaching, management, all of those sort of things, and so football was something that I gave a lot to, but it's certainly given me a lot back now. But as far as commitment levels, the commitment to be what you want to be is huge, and the onus always falls back on you. Like, I know that my family wanted it for me, and they wanted it me, but unless I decided I wanted it for myself, then it was never going to happen. And I think, regardless of what I do, what I see in life, and I've seen a lot of things when when I watch my kids, like, I know that they're exact same as me. They're going to get out of life exactly what they put into it, and it's fun, just, I suppose, just watching that journey. It's a lot more fun watching the journey than being on it, if I'm totally honest, because there's a lot of bumps in the road, but I wouldn't change a thing, from deciding that I was going to dedicate my life to football.
So you play every day, and you enjoy it, as you say. Is there any point in time where it didn't become enjoyable?
Well, I suppose I went through a bit of a rough time. At 14 years of age, I walked into a bookmaker's. I had my first bet on a horse, and that led me to, going into an addiction. At 18 years of age, I was addicted to gambling. And I'm not going to bore people with that whole story, but basically, if you can imagine, football was always number one, and family. All of those things become second place, and the gambling, or the addiction in my case, became number one. And I spent 16 years battling that. I spent 16 years hiding away from it, hiding away from emotions, locking my feelings down. My father died in 1989. I wasn't able to cry at his grave. I waited until, not waited, I wasn't able to do that until 2006, whenever I had got treatment, and I had got over my gambling addiction. And I suppose I never want that to define me, the fact that I had an addiction, but it's very much part of my story. And I suppose if I was going to talk about times where I struggled, I would have struggled a lot with that. Because if you can imagine, I walk into a change room. Change rooms are very unforgiving places sometimes. You have to walk in, and, like, people expected me to walk in and be, full of crack, full of banter, smile on my face, and I wasn't going to let people down. So I walked in there and I did that, but that wasn't how I felt. And when you're hiding your feelings away, and you're not portraying your true self, it's a tough run, and that's a tough run that I was on for some time. And I know the difference between where I was to being in the addiction and then getting out the far side of it. And life is a lot easier when you're not carrying that burden around with you, because, as I say, you spend a lot of time going around with a mask on, trying to be somebody that you're not. And when you're trying to be somebody you're not, that brings a huge amount of pressure onto the individual. But I suppose if you're asking me about a time where there was a struggle, I suppose that would have been the time that I really struggled.
Why do you think actually it took sort of 16 years to come to terms with it?
I had come to terms with it on numerous occasions, but I suppose I hadn't shared it with anybody. You know, I had never shared how I felt because, as I say, I was walking uh, into a change room and I felt, you know, I had to be a certain way. And I thought if I start to show these guys weakness, if I start to show the opposition weakness, if I start to show the manager weakness, that maybe my time would be numbered, or they would see a weakness in me that I didn't want them to see. Now, I know that wasn't. I know now that wasn't the way I should have acted on it. I should have spoke about it sooner, and definitely, you know, that would have eased my journey a lot. But I suppose that's the reason, because you know I wasn't sharing it with anybody, or I wasn't telling people what was going on in my life, and it's a very lonely place to be when you're not doing that. I mean, like honestly, like I went to train and people go, that guy has it sorted. This guy, you know, this guy has absolutely everything going for him. Uh, and yet, like, I go home from training, I pull the covers over my head and I wouldn't want to get up. And that's not a nice place to be. And it's certainly, it's took its toll on me over those 16 years. Why did it take me 16 years? Courage, the courage just to share it with somebody. And once I did, then things got a lot easier, very, very quickly for me.
Hi, so if you relate that back to what everybody's going through now with COVID and not being able to go out, and all these boys missing out on activity, seeing their mates, playing football, doing whatever they enjoy doing, how important is it to talk to people and let people know how you feel?
It's massively important, and I suppose it's even more important now because we are in the situation that we're in. You know, I already mentioned my kids, and my kids are very young. They're 8, 6, and 2. The 2-year-old obviously doesn't find any break from the norm. The 8-year-old is very happy because he has a multitude of things that he likes to do every day, and he tries to fit them all in. Like, you know, when 6 o'clock comes, he's on the PlayStation and he's playing with one of his friends who lives, 15 or 16 mile away. And the young fella at 6 is lost because all he wants to do is he wants to be with his friends. He's very outdoorsy. He wants to play football. The evenings don't really suit that, and he's struggling. And I think just to admit, for him to say out loud, like, listen, I'm just not, I'm struggling a little bit. And, when you hear a 6-year-old say that, the first thing is you feel sorry for him, but, I want to sort it out. I want solutions, for him. But rather than solutions, just to sit there and listen to him for a while is probably as much as he wants right now. So, with the current situation, is tough. I think, when we all got off school in March, and we had the good weather and all of those sort of things during the summer, I think certainly people took it as, look, this is not going to last. Let's make the most of what we have. This time around, people are a little bit fatigued. The evenings, aren't long. It's dark, it's cold, it's all those sort of things. The opportunity is not as plentiful to get out and about and do stuff. And I think because of that, it means that it's tougher. But when it does get tough, that's the time you need to be talking to people. And again, you're stuck in a house. For a lot of these young people, they'll be stuck in a house with their parents. A lot of time, the last person you're going to talk to is your parents. But you'll find that your parents are a lot more understanding, have seen a lot of things down through the years with experience, and may have some help for you. But at the very least, they'll sit there and they'll listen to you. And I think that's the most important thing.
Good stuff. You talked there a little bit around obviously growing up. We've talked a little bit around the addiction problem that you had. If we look then at your career, making it into the Armagh senior panel, talk to us about that experience, what that was like. First of all, make your debut for Armagh, and then to have the career that you did have, and then obviously being involved in having an all-star and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. Talk to us about.
I made my debut for Armagh at 18 years of age. I was still at school. I played against Down in a McKenna Cup final. That was my first game. I was taken on after about 40 minutes. We scored a goal and 2 points, and we ended up winning the game. And on the back of there's news the next day when I walked into school was schoolboy Down's down. And as a young lad, I suppose you think, you've got the headlines, you've sort of made it. And actually it was the opposite of that. It took me probably another 18 months to properly break into that Armagh team and sort of make any sort of mark. I found that tough because I'd never been a sub before. I'd never had to really, if I'm honest, I never had to work that hard in order to get into the team. And yet I look back on that and I think that's the thing that stood to me most. And that's one of the reasons why I was not going to say I had the career I had, but even the length of career that I had. I played with Armagh 15 odd years. We look at playing with Armagh when I was young, it wasn't glamorous. We used to get beat on a regular basis. It was tough, and there was a lot of character building in there, and there was a lot of learning in there, and there was a lot of hurt in there. And I think when we eventually started to do something around 1989, so about probably 4 or 5 years after, by the time I'm probably 4 or 5 years into the panel, and we started to be successful. We started to win Ulster Championships. We were running close in national leagues. We were in All-Ireland semi-finals. And yeah, it was a time where, as I say, it wasn't that glamorous, but we were starting to realize that there was good players there and we were starting to go somewhere. So for me, that initial part of the journey was tough, but I think that's the thing that stood to me as time went on. Then when we started to get successful, it went like a blur. It seems like, people talk to me about, remember what happened in this year and 99 and 2000 and 2001, 2002. For me, all those years sort of rolled into themselves. Obviously, the standout was winning an All-Ireland in 2002. Again, I didn't make it easy for myself. I missed a penalty in the first half of the game, and I scored a goal in the second half, and we ended up winning the game, luckily enough. But I just think that nothing was coming easy. Nothing was coming without a little bit of a bump in the road. And as I say, I still look back on that and think that that's the one thing that stood to me. It stood to me on the pitch, off the pitch, and it stands to me in coaching and management as well. And you take a different view of a lad who misses a chance or stuff like that, and misses a free kick, misses a penalty, whatever it is. And as I say, I think that the other things that stood to me. But like, if you can imagine, a young lad, and coming from where I come from, I started playing across seniors when I was 16 years of age. You're playing in front of a couple of hundred people. Maybe if it's a championship match, a couple of thousand people, and then you will run out on the Crow Park in front of 82,500 people, and like, you can't think about it. I suppose the lucky thing for me was that we were after winning a couple of All-Ireland club championships, and we had a guy called Colin O'Rourke from, I know you guys probably won't know him, but a guy called Colin O'Rourke from Meath come in, who'd won All-Irelands, who had a huge amount of experience and winning All-Irelands, running out on the Crow Park in front of huge crowds. And before the All-Ireland club final, he came to us and he said, listen, guys, see when you get out onto the pitch, have a good look around you, have a look in the stand, do whatever you want, take a minute to do that, and then just focus, because it's just another game. I can never get my head around it. It was just another game when there was 82,500 people there, but that's the sort of frame of mind that I sort of had to try and get in. When I was playing at that stage, even 2002, I didn't have a lot of nerves. I didn't have a lot of apprehension. It was only later on in my career, that those nerves started to appear. I felt as if, every opportunity I had was an opportunity to enjoy what I was doing, and I think when I look back on it, the nerves didn't do me any good when I started to get them on a regular basis, maybe on a Wednesday before a game. I mean, like, I always hear people saying, "Were you nervous before the game?" And when they used to say that to me when I was young, I was thinking, why would I be nervous? It's a game of football. It's something I enjoy. I felt in my mind it was the only thing I was sort of good at, or was talented at, or gifted at, or whatever, and therefore, I was gonna try and use that gift as to the best of my ability. And when I was in that frame of mind, as I said, the game comes quite easy to you, but it's when that changes that you guys don't have to worry about that for a while. But when that changes and you start to doubt yourself because you're starting to get older and maybe slower, and your body shapes changing and different things got. But I suppose that time was very, very enjoyable because, as I say, it just felt as if it was coming very natural to me, and I didn't have the same nerves as other guys had before games. Not until I was a lot older.
You mentioned there about 2002 and the All Ireland final. I was lucky enough to be there that day myself. But what goes through your head when you miss the penalty, and how do you lift yourself up? And what advice would you give to the lads, if they make a mistake in a game, how do they cope with it?
Well, I'll tell you this one, and I won't bore you with this one, but there was a guy called Bill McCarry who had missed a penalty in 1953, and they'd mentioned it at his funeral. The priest had mentioned it at his funeral, so that's how long it stuck with that man. And my uncle, as I already said, played on that team, and he constantly talked about it. And as soon as I missed the penalty, that's who I thought about. I thought about Bill McCarry. I thought about the consequences of Armagh losing another All Ireland and me missing a penalty. So all negative thoughts. And luckily enough, we were a couple of minutes to half time. And we had two sports psychologists working with us at that time. And one of the things he said, if you make a mistake, pick up a piece of grass, throw it away, and that's that moment gone. Missing a penalty in an All Ireland final, a piece of grass probably wasn't going to do it. If I had to dig up a sod maybe and throw it or something like that. But when I went in at half time, I spoke to one of them, and he handed me a ball and he said, "Listen, when you go out in the second half, run up to the hill and stick it in the back of the net." And I couldn't bring myself to do that, but I took the ball out on the field and I just kicked it as hard as I could. I just lashed it up in the air, and I felt as if I was letting go of something. And when I did, I think then, second half, I had a much better second half, obviously scored a goal, erased the memory, hopefully, of the penalty. And I suppose what it does for you is it gives you a quick wake-up call as to where you're at, how important it is that, like, when I went in at halftime, I had made the decision. I was just going to, in the second half, I didn't care if things weren't going to happen for me or not. I was just going to work as hard as I could. I was going to give as much as I could for as long as I could, and use up all the fitness, all the energy, all the training, and let it all out there in the pitch. And I suppose when you break it down and you make it simple for yourself, and that's what I tell a lot of young lads, and even when I was older and I was playing with some of the younger guys, I always told them that. I said, lads, let's not go out with the expectation of scoring, let's say for anybody playing soccer, a hat trick, or for a forward to score 1-7 or 1-8. Let's break it back down even further and just say, listen, lads, for the next 30 minutes till half time, we're going to work as hard as we can as a unit. And when you simplify it like that, a couple of young lads have come to me and said, when you simplify it like that, you're not putting a huge burden of expectation on you to score goals, score points, whatever. And but that naturally happens as a result of you putting the work in, and that's something which as I say, stuck with me from that All Ireland final. I decided I was just going to work as hard as I could, and as a result of that, things just happened for me.
What sort of things do you have to do to reach that level? You know, when you're involved in this in the senior setup, and what's the commitment levels like? Because obviously, you know, lads have jobs and stuff like that. Just tell us a little bit around the commitment.
Well, I suppose the thing about me playing inter-county senior football at that time was the club was going very well at that time. So we're sort of going in from one season to the next. We weren't doing a huge amount of pre-season work. So personally, I always felt sharp. I never felt burnt out of that because, you know, you weren't burdened with 2 pre-seasons every year or 3 pre-seasons every year. And I used to find that when we went in after March, we probably missed the first 2 rounds of the league or maybe 3 rounds. And you went back in and boys are expecting you maybe to be a bit lethargic, but you're match sharp. You know, you've played a lot more games than they have, and you just went back into it that way. I suppose the biggest thing for me was when I was away from the pitch. You know, what was I doing when I was away from the pitch? So, yes, everybody's got their gym programs and all that, but I break it down even further than that. I would, what are you putting into your body? Do you know what I mean? What you know, what's the eating habits like? I mean, you did a cooking course yesterday. I did a TV program in the south. Well, I don't know how long ago, maybe 3-4 years ago. And to be honest, since I did that, the eating habits in my house have changed. But when I was playing inter-county football, I was living with my mum, and like, you know, dietitians were coming in, they were giving us what they recommended, and you know, it was boiled or it was steamed. There was no butter, no sauce, and that's just what it took. Because when I started eating properly or eating really well, I don't think I was eating poorly, but when I started to focus really on what I was eating, what I was putting into my body, how well hydrated. I mean, we were being tested about how well hydrated we were going into training, and for anybody who doesn't know how you do that, you're basically peeing in a bottle. And there was a girl there who was sort of you know, making sure she was testing and making sure that, you know, we drank the amount of water we needed for that day. And it sounds as if, you know, at the time I thought we're getting maybe a little bit too deep into this, but that was necessary, because that was getting at, like, I would say in 1999, 2000, 2001, we needed another 5, 10, 15% to get over the line in All Ireland final. And when 2002 came, we introduced a few things, as I said, dietitian, the hydration, you know, an extra little bit of warm up. We were, the guys who were injured were doing prehab and rehab. Everybody was on the pitch every night, and those little things give us that extra 10 or 15% in order for us to go ahead and win All Ireland and keep challenging. So, just those things away from the pitch are so important. I mean, sometimes I take the underage training here in Cross. So last year it was under 6s and under 9s, and this year it'll be under 7s, under 10s. And, you know, I would have mummies coming to me all the time saying, you know, why is my lad not improving enough? How come he's not improving the same way as X, Y, and Z is improving? And I say, well, we only have the kids for 2 hours a week. There's 168 hours in a week. And if you're doing 2 hours of it, I mean, think about what you're doing when you're away from it. I mean, I mentioned about my wee fella, you know, he's on the PlayStation. If he's not on the PlayStation, there's goals I'm just looking straight out in the window. There's goals out there, and he spends all of his time out there, you know, kicking, and when it's bright, and that's how I know that you know, he's not just spending 2 hours at it, he's spending a lot more than that. So there's 168 hours in a week, and you try and break them down and put all that stuff together. If you're doing 2 hours football, chances of improving are poor. Then add to that, if you're not eating properly, or, you know, you're not hydrating during the day. And I know maybe you feel as if it's early, but these habits are good to get into, you know, even at a very early stage.
Yeah, it's something that we've discussed previously about the importance of looking after yourself off the pitch, sleep, sleep properly,
Sleep, yeah.
eat properly, all that type of stuff. And also, there's no substitute for working hard and putting the hours in and working on your technique and whatever it may be. Talk to us about the opportunities that have come out of playing Gaelic football. Obviously, Gaelic football, you played, most of your time in Ireland, but then whenever you get a chance to go elsewhere to play it or visit different places, talk to us just a little bit around that.
Well, I suppose when you play Gaelic football, you never think that it's going to lead to something which is further afield. And I've had those opportunities both playing. I've played in America and I've played in Australia. For my sins, I actually played in a tournament in Australia on my honeymoon. Now, how she let me away with that one, I don't know, but I've been paying for it ever since. But when I went to Australia, I went over there to, and there was a couple of Armagh guys. They had heard that I was heading to Australia for honeymoon. I was supposed to go for 3 weeks. Ended up there for 4 weeks because I stayed an extra week to play in this tournament in Gosford, and we actually won the tournament. Wolf Tones in Melbourne. I played in America. I played with Donegal in America. Spent, I was going to say I spent a summer out there, but it wasn't really a summer. It was a couple of weeks here and a couple of weeks there. I've been to presentations all over the world, London, Qatar. I've been a lot to the Middle East, America, and I suppose that has given me the opportunities to travel and see different parts of the world, but also see how important Gaelic football is outside of. And do you know what? When I say Gaelic football, sport, because when I went to Qatar, myself and my wife went a couple of years ago, maybe about probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But when we went out there, I realised that it wasn't just Irish people who were playing. There was Scottish, there was Welsh, there was English, there was Qataris, there was people from all over the world. And it was a community sport. Okay, it was GA in this case, but sport had brought these people together. And so that's the sort of opportunities. Obviously, even just as far as making a living, the punditry is great. There's coaching, there's management. So it's afforded me all of those opportunities which probably before I finished football, I wasn't thinking that much about, and I wasn't sure if coaching was for me. But once I started at college level, I started to dip my toe in. I did the club minors. As I say, I'm still, I do underage with the club as well. And I suppose maybe one day inter-county. So I suppose that's something that I found out about myself after I played, that I did have that inkling to coach and now also to manage, because management for me, 3/4 of it is probably about managing the people that are playing for you.
I'm just going to go on to the questions now that have came in. One of them said, who is the biggest inspiration to you, or who was the biggest inspiration to you in your career?
Well, I suppose I don't want this to sound airy-fairy or cheesy even, I suppose, but my mum was the one when I was young who drove me to games. She drove me to training. She supported me. She always had me back. And I suppose she was very, very influential. But if you want to talk about people who actually on the pitch, I suppose Joe Kernan was hugely influential because I played with him. In fact, a lot of my senior career, I would have played under Joe Kernan both at club level and then at inter-county level. So I suppose my mum and probably Joe Kernan then after that.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Joe obviously was the one who won the All Ireland with. I mean, do you still have a relationship with Joe and the family and whatever?
Yeah, no. I spoke to Joe probably last week. We would still have. We wouldn't. Obviously, at the moment, we're not seeing that much of each other. But like Cross is a very small place, so he has grandkids who are playing football along with my kids, and they're always up and about on the train and stuff. So yeah, I would see Joe all the time. We have a very good relationship with him, always had.
There's another question that has come in here. Somebody has asked what your job is now.
Well, my full-time job is I work for a foundation called Sport and Chance. So that is a foundation set up by a guy called Tony Adams, who was Arsenal captain and England captain. A lot of you guys probably won't know him or know much about him. In fact, I went into a school recently, and it was 16, 17, not recently, probably before lockdown. And I said where I was working, and I said, does anybody know? And they all give me the blank stare. So I don't expect people to actually know who he is. But he set up a foundation that was around addiction. It's around helping people. It's around getting people to talk. So I work full time for them. I deal with mainly academies. So Premier League, all EFL league clubs, rugby league clubs, jockeys, darts players, you name it. We deal with. We talk about. It's mainly education. Last week I was chatting to Leeds under 21s or under 23s. Wednesday morning at Sheffield United. So that's my full-time job at the minute. And I have a few other little things going on, obviously, at home with punditry and different things like that. And I'm not doing as much travel as I was, because I used to go to England once a month and stay there for 7 or 8 days. So that's now a lot easier doing it from home. So that's the plus factor of the coronavirus for me.
Get to spend more time at home sometimes. Yeah, it's good to get away. But question here: who's your favorite player that you played with?
John McEntee. Again, I'm not sure if you guys know, but I played with him with Cross and with Armagh. The simple reason why I always say him is because every time he had the ball, he looked for me, and I like that. There's a lot of players I play with who wouldn't be on the same wavelength as what John was on. So I made a run, John put it in a certain area, and I was able to get it and do whatever after that. But he would have been the best player I played with, because I say he always looked for me, always brought me into the game, and yeah. I played a bit of soccer in my time as well, and I played with a guy called David Crawley. Again, you guys won't know. He was at Man City for a while, but then he carved out a great career for himself with Dundalk and Shelbourne and teams like that. But I played with him at a decent level soccer-wise, and he was different gravy. I know the guys who are playing the Premier League and league clubs are exceptional, but just to play alongside him in the pitch, like he was different gravy.
Good stuff. There's a question here. What is the most goals you've scored in a game?
Scored 6 goals in a league game in Armagh one day against Silverbridge, who are our neighbours, which is good. But that's probably the most 6.
What did you ever plan what you were going to do after football? Did you ever have a plan, an exit plan, or how did you cope with not playing anymore?
Well, funny you should ask that, because that's a lot of what we do in Sport and Chance. We talk about transition. So, for example, a lot of the rugby league guys that we'd be dealing with would, I'd ask them, well, what's the plan when you're finished? I don't know. We'll see what happens. Do you know what I mean? And for those guys, it's like when you're talking to, the highest paid Premier League players, they're not worried about transition, because usually they have enough money to sustain them for the rest of their lives. Whereas guys lower down the leagues, are very much in tune with. Some of them would have degrees already. Someone would be doing degrees along with playing the football or rugby or whatever. As far as I was concerned, it's easier I think it's easier when you're amateur, because you sort of always have had to work alongside it. But like, I'm 45 now, and I still don't really know what I want to do in my life. But I am in a certain field now, so I'm a trained addiction counsellor, and I'm a trained addiction counsellor, and I suppose that's the field that I'm working in. That's the interest that I have. I'm very interested in, like, for example, this lockdown, how people are dealing with it. What's the consequences for young people? What's the consequences for families? So that's my interest now. So, and that has been my interest, I suppose, since I stopped playing football. The good thing about me stopping to play or not continuing to play anymore was that I had decided I was going to quit, and two boys from Cross came to me, the management, and said, would you do one more year, whether that be, as a sub or whatever. And I did one more year, and I realized when I did that one more year, starting to pick up injuries, starting to find it difficult to recover from those injuries. And once I realized that, I knew I was done and dusted. So I didn't leave with any regrets, or I didn't feel as if I had another season in me or anything like that. So I suppose that for me, the transition probably was made a little bit easier. And, as part of what I was doing and where I came from, I was very much aware of the fact that, I don't want to stop playing football and all of a sudden be sitting in the house going, what am I going to do with myself? So I was coaching at college level, and at that stage, and I say still, at underage.
Brilliant, super. Look, I'm going to finish off with one last question. Thank you everybody for the questions coming in. They've been great. Last question: who was the toughest player that you ever played against?
A guy called Seamus Moynihan. He played with Kerry. I played with him, I played on him in an All-Ireland semi-final in 2000, and he absolutely destroyed me. And we got a draw out of the game, and I played against him the following week, and I scored 1-9 off him. And I still felt he got the better of me. That's how good this guy was. He was physical, fast, and he was a brilliant reader of the game. And I had actually a chance to win that game for us right at the end, and he was instrumental. And he just people have never said it to me, but I've always realised that the keeper saved it. But the keeper saved it, but he actually got a hand on me before I actually kicked the ball, and I don't know where he came out of, because I was in a world of space when I got the ball. So probably him. I seen somebody put up there what soccer team to support. So if I really want to become all popular, I'll tell you, I'm a Man United fan, and I've had a horrendous week.
If I'd have known that, I wouldn't ask you. No, brilliant, good stuff. Luke, thank you very much, Oisin. Been really great to listen to you and be really open and honest as well about stuff, which is admirable. And
thank you.
I think everybody will join me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best of luck, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Oisin.
Thank you.
See you now.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Brilliant.
Bye.